Don't know what I'm going to do this week. I've got nothing to talk about. Universe, if you can hear me, can you please give me a sign? That was quick. Who is it? It's Kara Buntin from YouTube. Hello.
I just watched your video about not wanting to be a six-figure seller, and I totally agree with it. And I was just wondering, since you seem like you're not a jerk, would you like to do a collaboration for YouTube?
Well, yes. You also seem like you're not a jerk, so that would be lovely. Wait, will Tessie be there?
Maybe.
Okay, no, that's great. How about you do a video on one of a kind, but from a vintage perspective, and I'll do one of selling one of a kind items, but handmade.
That sounds good.
See you later. And that brings us to today. Okay, so Kara has kindly filmed her thoughts on selling one of a kind vintage, and I am now going to react to her video. I know, I've always wanted to do a reaction video. It's very exciting. And then at the end, I'll link to Kara's video where she's reacting to me talking about selling one of a kind handmade. You see how that works? We're so clever. All right then, so just to introduce Kara in case you don't know who she is, and if you don't, where have you been? Actually, I'll let Kara introduce herself. So grab a coffee. I have, and let's go.
Hi everyone, if you haven't met me before, my name is Kara Buntin and I'm a longtime Etsy seller with 3 shops, and one of them is vintage. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about 5 things that vintage sellers run into because it is one of a kind and it's a little bit different from selling handmade or supplies, and just some challenges that vintage sellers have and ways around them. The first thing that vintage sellers have to contend with is pricing things correctly, because a lot of times you have to kind of go with what the market will bear, and how do you know what that is? Because things really are worth exactly what someone is willing to pay for them. And if you've bought things, then you have to take that into account because you have a cost that went into it. If you're just selling stuff from around your house like I do, then your cost is 0, but you still don't want to underprice things because then you're the undercutter and nobody likes the undercutter, and that does hurt the entire marketplace after a while if everybody's pricing things really low. The way that I've been pricing things in my vintage shop is just to go and look for comps. I look for exactly the same type of item, and if I can find the same thing that has sold, and I'm not talking about things that are listed, I'm talking about things that have sold. So I look on eBay under the sold items to see what things sold for, and I also kind of look to see if things that are listed now are selling for a lot more, because it could be that the thing that I have is trending and it's more popular than it used to be when it first sold. And then I go on Etsy and I see what else those things are selling for. And usually you can kind of get to a price that is fair for you, and it gives you a little room to add in a sale if you want to run a sale on something. Definitely take every coupon, every sale, every potential discount into account when you're pricing your things, because that way if Etsy shows your things for an off-site ad and you have to pay for that, it's not going to hurt your bottom line when you do sell the item.
Yes, factoring in the price of any kind of discount, coupon or sale, as Kara says, factor it into your prices. So many people do not do that, and then obviously when you run a sale or offer a coupon or what have you, then you're making a loss. But then if you do run a sale or you offer a coupon regularly, then you're going to make regular losses. So not good. Yes, what Kara said, factor it into your prices. Okay, her next point.
The second thing that I've run into in my vintage shop, and my vintage shop is not very active, but if it was and I had a lot of stock, this would be a big problem, is where do you keep your merchandise? Because you have to store it somewhere. And if you have no system at all and you're just putting things on a shelf somewhere or in a box, then you're going to run into real problems when it comes time to find that thing and pack it. You're going to waste a lot of time searching for things. It's just going to be a logistical nightmare. So what I would suggest is to have different categories of things that you keep in a specific place. And that way you can also just kind of see at a glance, are you getting low in that type of stock? Should you be looking for more things in that category? Or do you have something that just sits there and never sells? Because that can tell you not to buy more of that kind of thing and not to sink your money into it and waste it if it's not going to sell. So definitely get some kind of a storage system, even if it's just shelving, where you can see things easily, or you can put them in bins that you have clearly marked. And that way you're not going to have to waste a lot of time searching for things when they do sell, and you can just go directly to the item, pick it up, pack it up, and get it out.
This is actually quite interesting because it's not really something that I've personally had as a one-of-a-kind handmade seller, mainly because I can't make that much stock, although I'm sure that there are handmade sellers that do and need the storage space. It's not really something that's ever crossed my mind, but that's a very good point. Here's mine. As you can see, it's still quite a chunky storage solution in my office, but it's what's needed for me. So I love Kara's tip about storing things in certain places so that you can see when a certain item is running low. She's a smart lady, is Kara.
The third thing that vintage sellers have to deal with as one-of-a-kind items is that you don't have repeat items to sell and to build up that listing quality score to get like the credit for sales for that. And that's just a natural kind of problem with one of a kind, but there is a way that you can on Etsy get around that a little bit. And I've talked about this in one of my other videos, but for example, what I did, I had a whole bunch of old wedding cake toppers and I listed them as wedding cake toppers. I put them all in the picture and then I did variations. So A was one of them, B was another one, and people could choose that, and then that listing would still be active. So it's basically giving that listing a little more benefit in the searches by not having everything separated out.
I don't know if you saw me do that, but I forgot that I was filming momentarily and looked at my fabrics. That's a really good workaround that I've never thought about before, and I was just trying to work out if it was something that I could do to my shop. I'm not sure if I could. With regards to vintage, it's quite a creative workaround to try and use variations on colour and stuff so you can get more eyeballs on stock that wouldn't usually get eyeballs on. The metaphor of eyeballs is a bit grim, but you get my point. That's really good. And after I finish filming this video, I am going to sit down and have a little think if I can apply this to my own shop. Thank you, Kara.
The next thing that vintage sellers have trouble with is finding keywords that aren't too specific. And vintage is interesting because a lot of people will search for very specific brand names or specific styles or lot numbers, or, you know, like they have different collections they're trying to fill in. And so they're looking for very specific keywords. What you need to do is kind of give yourself permission to put some weird keywords in there and see if they work. And I will tell you that one of the keywords that brings people to my vintage shop is weird stuff. And I put that in every single listing because I do have a lot of weird stuff in my vintage shop. Investigate keywords that you wouldn't normally think would go with that. And don't stick with just the description of the item or just the maker or just the collection number or whatever it is. Think of some other things that it could be used for and kind of be willing to put in some weird keywords because that could get you more traffic and make it easier to sell your merchandise.
I love this tip. I think this tip is very freeing and it kind of gives you a permission slip to experiment and get a little bit playful maybe with your keywords. And I think that's important because you need to be able to think out of the box a bit, as Kara says, in order to find the unicorn keywords that nobody else is using, but that buyers might be searching for. Because too many of us get stuck in that trap of we think with the search algorithm in mind when we come up with our keywords and we don't necessarily think like a buyer. And I promise you, sometimes the long tail keywords that we can put in thinking that it'll be perfect for the algorithm is not necessarily the stuff that a buyer would think of putting in. And I know this because as a buyer, I put some random stuff in the search bar and made purchases from those searches. So yeah, another good tip well made, Mrs. Let's get back in.
The last thing that I would say to vintage sellers is if you want to increase your sales, you have to get rid of the idea that everything is a precious item that needs to be used in specifically the way that you're thinking that it should be used for. And I am just as bad as anyone else. I'll see something that I really like and I'm like, I can't even conceive of someone using this in a different way than the way that I would use it. But the truth is that a lot of people use vintage items for crafts or for repurposing.
Ha! 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 Hold that thought. Hold that thought. Ugh. Hi. Vintage wedding dress, darling. But my point, I bought this vintage wedding dress to pull apart on a scale of 1 to, oh my God! How much have I upset the vintage community? So yes, in that vein, what Kara has just said, she's absolutely blimmin' right. Let's crack on.
You can't limit yourself to thinking that the keywords and the use for things that you're going to put with this is only going to be what it was intended to be used for to begin with. And I know that a lot of vintage sellers don't like this, but it's just the way that it is. So accept it, move on. And if something is super valuable, that's one thing, but the majority of vintage items are not super valuable. And like I said at the beginning, things are worth exactly what someone is willing to pay for it. And someone might be willing to pay for old plates that are going to be broken up and used as a mosaic more than someone who would need that plate to finish a collection or to actually use as tableware. So just kind of, it's a hard thing to do if you love vintage. I love vintage, but the reality is that there's a lot of vintage items that really are not that valuable, quote unquote valuable. That kills me, but I know that it's true. So get over that idea. It will open up a whole new bunch of keywords that you can use. It'll open up a whole new audience for your products, and it will help you sell more because you're not limiting yourself to trying to just attract the people that want to keep that thing exactly the way that you want to keep it. So I hope that was helpful, and make sure that you go over to my channel next and watch the video that Kim did talking about one-of-a-kind handmade as opposed to one-of-a-kind vintage, and see what kind of similarities and differences there are, and I will be reacting to that over on my channel, so I'll see you over there.
Well, that was so good. I've had so much fun. I'm going to go now because I'm having something of a wardrobe malfunction. But if you want to go and see Kara reacting to my video where I talk about trying to sell handmade one-of-a-kind items, head on over to her channel. The video is here, and I will see you again soon. Bye! Oh, it's so tight and itchy. Oh God.